Hi there, I'm Crystal Gazer and welcome to my channel. So today we're looking at builds, specifically how to make your own build. If you enjoy using wiki builds, then carry on, they're really useful. But today we're looking at sort of how to create your own. If I'm looking off to this side, it's because that is where my bullet points are, because I know I can waffle. Okay, so we're going to be using my main Mesmer for today. I've been running around with her in Janthea Wilds, and she is not living up to expectations anymore. So I thought that would be a good time, given I've got to look at her build anyway, to kind of talk you through at least how I approach a build. As I've already said, if you enjoy wiki builds, then use the wiki builds. So I'm just going to pop her in the guild hall. She shouldn't get attacked there, but you never know. And it could have put an event in that I haven't seen yet. Okay, so the first thing to think about is, what do you like about this class? What do you want to achieve with this build? And also, like, what's your play style? So let's break that down. So for me, my playstyle, I don't enjoy tanks. At least not tank support. I find them too slow. I know there's a lot to be paying attention to on the screen in terms of sort of looking after your party with those sorts of builds, but I personally don't enjoy them. I like offensive support and DPS builds. Those are my two main playstyles. They feel a little bit faster, even if sort of brain-wise or mentally they're not, because you're paying attention to the same amount of stuff, it's just in a different place. With all builds, for me, I have to enjoy the weaponry that I'm using. I have to enjoy the feel of it and the sort of pace of those weapons. So with Mesmer, that for me means greatsword, sword, daggers, pistol for offhand. With my Chronomancer, I use the shield because she's mainly the one that gives to other people. In terms of what you're wanting to achieve, that would be looking at what are you going to use this for. So, like, if you're pugging, you need to make sure that what you're offering is close to a wiki build if it's not a wiki build, because a lot of people do run wiki builds. So if you're not running with a group that you have played with a lot, then, or aren't going to be playing with a lot, then, like, you haven't had time to excuse me, develop the synergy for that group. Like, I've got there's a 3-man group that I run around in. My partner and my friend are the other 2 members of that, and we've had plenty of time to work out what it is each of us needs to offer in any given situation, and we've got characters that offer those things. But we've had time to do that. Like I say, with a pug group, you haven't got time to do that. You're probably not going to play with them again, so there's no point in spending that time, or at least this is how a lot of people think. There's not any point spending that time and energy working out how you can make your builds work with each other. For solo builds, you will have to sacrifice certain things. You'll be able to do what you're trying to achieve reasonably well, but it won't be as well as if you're running around in a group. Simply because you've kind of got to do bits of everything for yourself. So if you're looking for DPS, then you'll need to sacrifice some of that to be able to have sustainability. If you are predominantly tanky, then tanky with support, sorry, then you'll need to sacrifice some of that so that you can actually kill whatever it is that's in front of you attacking you. because otherwise that thing is going to break your tanking rotation. That's just examples. So this build is a solo build. And part of the reason I think that she is doing badly is this line. So having chosen your sort of start point, you know what you want this thing to achieve. You know the sort of weaponry that you enjoy using, or that might be good for what you want to achieve. And what was the other one? Oh, and you know your playstyle. That was it. Then we look at the trait lines. So these are the things that go on in the background while you're playing. They're very important, but choosing the right trait line isn't the only part of this. You know, you can run exactly the same trait lines as somebody else, but having a different combination of the optional stuff will mean that you will create a very different feel, or potentially create a very different feel and different things that you're either offering the group or yourself than somebody else. So we've got illusions on. That's pretty standard for me because I guess I base most of my builds on a shatter build, given that they're not pure shatter builds. This is the line I think is the problem, is the inspiration line. That's held over or left over from my Chronomancer builds, because my Chronomancer builds, I've got an Alacrity build and I've got a Quickness build, just so that I can throw them on when I'm part of a group, depending on what they need. Okay. So having got to this point, you then basically just read what they say they do. If it sounds like it's going to buff what you're trying to achieve, that's the line to go for. So given that I'm looking for more DPS, that's the main problem I'm having. I'm not having a problem staying alive so much, unless I really misjudge sort of my placement. What I'm struggling with is very much the DPS element. So we're realistically with Mesmer, we're looking at domination or dueling. Dueling will enhance my phantasms. I don't really make many phantasms. I make clones and illusions, yes, but I don't make many specific phantasms. I think I've only got 2 skills that produce those. So that's not massively helpful. Dodging is always helpful, so buffing what happens during evades and what have you, that is helpful. But, excuse me, realistically, I don't think that's right for this particular build. So I'm going to go with domination. I'm using a greatsword, so buffing that is always a positive, which this particular line does. And it also buffs my damage anyway. A lot of people end up not really paying attention to the things you don't get options on. What I've found is if you don't, then bits of your build will not synergize with each other. And that is massively important if you want to get a decent build. It may not be an optimized build, but it'll be a decent build if it all kind of works together. So the first thing on this trait line is that it inflicts vulnerability when I interrupt. Now, do I interrupt a lot? Not really, but... So I do have an interrupt on here, which is my knockback. I do also have an interrupt here, which also inflicts vulnerability. I also inflict vulnerability here. So we're not going for a condition build with this. I'm very much a power build. I think I'm running assassins. Am I? Yeah, so I'm running assassins in my gear. So we're very much going for DPS, as in just like raw DPS rather than condition damage. But having the vulnerability means that I will inflict more damage, as will like anyone else I'm playing with. They will inflict more damage on whatever it is we're fighting. Vulnerability also helps with defiance bars. I don't think it helps so much in core, but elsewhere it certainly helps with defiance bar breaking, which is kind of a Mesmer's bread and butter. Or at least it used to be. Mourns the old Mesmer that was very broken, but understands the reason for rebalancing. So the next thing we're going to do is look at the different options we've got. So what have we got? We've got Bountiful Blades, which buffs my Greatsword skill. It also lets me produce another illusion that will become a clone, I think, if it stays up long enough. Certainly buffs that anyway. I could just straight buff my illusions where they do more damage. Or I could inflict vulnerability with every shatter. Now, is it worth going for that one? In my opinion, no, because I have vulnerability on this one. Where has it gone? I inflict vulnerability when I interrupt a foe. I inflict vulnerability on this skill. I think there's there's no vulnerability. Yeah, there is. 2. I inflict vulnerability on my Greatsword 2 skill. Is there any on here? Yeah. So I've got vulnerability on slot skill. That's the word. On my slot skill there. I think that's the only one I've got for... Yeah. So I'm doing a decent amount of vulnerability already. I don't really need to then have it on every single shatter. So I'm going to buff that. We get more vulnerability. So in this trait line, we're getting several levels of vulnerability here. Anyway. So with this, we're getting vulnerability on dazing or stunning. So every time I daze or stun someone, more vulnerability. Excellent. Wrong line. So this line, we could go for removing a boon. That's only really useful, in my opinion, on boon eaters. I'm not a boon eater, so there's no point with that. Because it's only going to rip 1 boon per hit. And that's per shatter. I'm not going to get, by the time I've got a boss in front of me or an enemy in front of me where their boons are actually a problem that vulnerability can't counter, ripping a single one away is not really going to be much help. Increase strike damage to foes with a lower health percentage than me. That could be useful because it'll speed up the fight. So although we'll start the fight the same as everybody else, it'll lead to a less protracted fight. I was going to say it won't let you end up in a protracted fight, but that's not true. So it'll reduce the length of the fight as their health goes down, provided you can heal yourself during the fight. As long as they're not also healing themselves, which most of the AI don't, you will end up with their health being lower than yours in terms of percentage. So that's useful because it gives you an extra 10% damage. Gain quickness when interrupting foes. I don't interrupt foes very often, to be honest, so I don't think that's worth taking for an optional thing. So we're going to go with that one. Did increase strike damage for each stack of vulnerability on your target. Okay, so not only are we doing increased damage anyway because they're vulnerable, we're now adding to that increased damage. And we get, what do we get? We get 5 stacks from that. We're doing 5 stacks from that. So that's 10. What do you do? Interrupting a foe. So that also interrupts a foe. So that's an additional 6 stacks. So we're looking at 16 stacks already. That's just from I fired that off and that off. And we've got 6 stacks. 16 stacks Oh, and that dazes as well, so that's another 16 stack. Sorry, another 6 stacks. It adds up quite quick off of just like 2 skills. So that's fine. You and your illusions deal increased strike damage to foes without boons. I'm not a boon eater. And disabling a foe removes boons from them. So again, that would be good, probably good for a boon eating mesmer. I'm not a boon eating mesmer. Shatter skills deal more damage. This bonus damage is doubled against foes that are not activating a skill. So given that I'm a virtuoso, and this is the style of thinking, I'm trying to show you the style of thinking for creating a build, and I'm only doing it on this one trait line. Don't worry, I'm not changing any of the trait lines. You would be bored rigid. So given that I am a virtuoso, and on the virtuoso line I have taken the ability to automatically stock blades while I'm in combat, and when I use a blade song I get stuff back, daggers back. That means that I will have a lot of blades. So if they are like walking into the situation and haven't activated a skill yet, I'm going to do increased damage if I take that one. There was another skill that I took, I think. No, it's not a skill. What is it? Ah, it's my passive. It's my passive on that. So I do also automatically stock blades. Like, it doesn't matter whether I'm in combat or not. Like, you'll see, you know, I am not currently in combat. That needs an enemy. That one didn't. Okay, so I currently have no blades. But I do. Because I got 2 back because I would be overstocked. And I am continuing to generate blades, which means I am constantly running around with blades over my head. So if I open with a shatter, I get increased strike damage from it. It's things like this, like with the synergy of just all of the lines working together, that you have to look at, is essentially what I'm saying, I guess. So that's what I would take in this situation for me, and that's the sort of thought process behind trait lines. So you'd go through and you'd do that with all of them. You would then double check that all of your trait lines and all of your skills are actually working together rather than against each other. There's only a couple of situations where I'd say that that's not the case. Like my... what's it called? Oh dear God. Ellie. My elementalist, she runs fire and water, so they don't actually work together. If I want her to be higher in DPS, then I put her on fire and air with whatever elite spec I'm running. But for the most part, like when she's running around on her own, she's running fire and water. Certainly when she jumps into a group situation, she'll be running that, because then she's got more sort of survivability, which means that other people aren't constantly having to pick me up off the floor, because I'm not great with Ellie. Yeah, you shouldn't have to be constantly picking an Ellie up off the floor, but yeah, I'm not great with them. Okay, so we've done that. The next thing we need to do is work out what stats will work well with what we've picked. So if we, without our armor, yeah, if without our armor we are squishy as hell, and you can see with my armor and everything, I am not exactly massively high health, then we will probably want some things to sort of plug the holes, as it were, especially if we're a solo build. If we're not a solo build, then it very much depends on what you're running into. You know, if you're pugging with a group and the wiki says that you do not need any form of sustainability really, then that's fine. But the majority of people will need some form of sustainability because they won't be running around in a group in open world. So what I tend to do is armor and weapons, my runes and sort of the base stats of the armor and weapons tend to buff what I've done with the trait lines and what I'm trying to achieve. And then my trinkets will usually sort of help with some of the holes a little bit, like I've got toughness on this one. It doesn't do a lot, and that is something to bear in mind when picking the stats that you want to run. So there's two big things to bear in mind for me. One is that 4 stats mean that you get less on each of the stats than a 3 stat sort of set of armor. If you split runes up as well, that's something to think about, because you won't get all of the effects if you do that. So if I was, say, running, I don't know, Dolyak for 3 and Mesmer for 3, then I would only get, with the Mesmer one, I would only get the plus 25 power, plus 35 precision, and plus 50 power. That's all I'd get from the Mesmer. And then I'd get the first 3 on Dolyak, if that's what I was running, for whatever reason. So that is something to consider. The other thing I'd say is, while you're trying stuff out, don't go for the highest tier, the highest rarity that you can get, because that could be very costly if you decide that actually that weapon or armor set isn't working for you and you need to replace it. So if you would go for exotic, go for rare. If you would go for ascended and you've got a reasonable amount of money or a reasonable amount of materials and crafting ability, then go for exotic. If you've got legendary already, then great, because you can just switch the stats on that at will, as long as you're not in combat. So there's not a cost there really. you can just try stuff out, play around, but I don't think most of us have legendary armor yet. I know some people do from the Secrets of Obscure, where we haven't got to go into World v World and everything, but yeah, so that's what I do. And then the final step for me is testing. So let's go tester. Okay, so my testing grounds are, I start off with ore, and it's core ore, not any of the expansion ore maps like Siren's Landing. And this is because core is meant to be sort of your start point. It's where you learn how to play the game. So if you can't survive in level 80 core, you're not going to survive anywhere else really. Well, that's what I've found anyway. So let's go find some stuff to kill in ore. This should be pretty straightforward.
Why exactly do we require both information and
I could outrun a centaur.
Let's go and find something a bit more than a spider. Oops. Have we got any? Oh, everything's we have a risen king. Cool. Where is that? I do not appear to be running towards it. Do, do, do. Okie dokie. This should be a reasonable test, actually. I'll go and grab that player in a second if I don't die. Which I hopefully won't. Yeah, I can't pick you up now because I don't have... So this is where I'm saying about sacrificing stuff. If you don't have... oh, what's it called? If you don't sacrifice some things, then you won't have sustainability, or you won't have enough DPS, you know, whichever way. So I have sacrificed my... I think it's feedback. Which lets me... What does that let me do? It lets me put up a bubble that prevents projectiles from getting through. And I've sacrificed that for more DPS. So...
They've got to be in here somewhere. I just feel it.
Ooh, I have a mail. I'll check that in a bit. Oh, bug off.
Where could they have hit them?
Oh, it's my daily gathering yield. Cool. So another big thing is to get used to where you're putting your skills
Got to be more here than dust and
and
bones.
what skills are on
Can't have
what
all been for
button.
nothing.
That way you don't have to really like look at what you're doing unless you then suddenly realise your hand is in completely the wrong position. at which point it can get very interesting.
Feel the fury.
12 seconds.
Success is ours.
Cool. Right. So, having tested in ore, if it works fine, which it should if you've synergized stuff, it should work in core ore. The next place I tend to go, hold on, I need to. Yeah, the next place I tend to go is Verdant Brink. Sorry, I had my recording software monitoring and recording, so I was hearing the game twice.
Wow, that's quality armor.
Okay, so the next place I go is Verdant Brink, and I mean, I usually test out on Pocket Raptors just to test the AoE before I go jumping into a hero point. But get off. I'm not gonna do that today. I am literally just gonna go do the hero point. If you're in rare gear, it's gonna be more difficult to do a hero point solo in Heart of Thorns, but there are hero points that certainly in exotic gear will be fine. You should be fine doing it solo. Oh, someone set this off and then left, right? Oh no, they didn't, they're still here. Okay. So I'll wait till this is done and then I'll do again. So, like I said, the oh, I can't do it again. Crap. I have to go to a different one. That one is going to be painful. If you can do the frogs with like 2, maybe 3 people, again, the build's fine. Solo builds are not going to be optimized because otherwise you're either not doing the damage or people are having to pick you up off the floor. You know, it's like, okay, I can't do that one. That's the one I go to.
Please,
But you get the point anyway. So you go do a hero point there, and then I'll go to where do I go to? The Crystal Desert. I go to Crystal Oasis, and I go to the hero point that's down here somewhere. And do that one. Again, if you can solo that, then your build's fine.
The council made the right call. Amnon is and always should be a free city.
Raheem's recruitment drive really paid off.
Sorry, I only got my Warclaw with oh, what's it called? With the new expansion. So I am still finding it quite funny seeing the things it can do. Because I am that much of a child. Ooh, well that's even better. An event.
Keep fighting. Without us, our city will starve.
Where are you coming from? Over there. Ah, bush. Well, I fucked that up, didn't I?
Chop 'em in two.
There's no escape for you.
Again, a lot of these events are soloable if you just keep plugging away at them. With older content, they do tend to nerf stuff, so if you played it on release and you're worried about sort of how difficult it's going to be, I wouldn't worry now. Secrets of the Obscure won't have been nerfed that much because that was the last expansion, but all the others will have had significant nerfing.
Time to do some real damage. We survived somehow. Thanks
Cool.
to you. We
So
can
that
go on
build
to save our
works.
people.
So now, I'm not going to take it around all of the different expansions because that would get too much. Where's the current map? Up there. So, given that I was having problems in Janthea Wilds, I mean not significant problems, I could hold my own, but I wasn't doing as much as I wanted to. The final thing would be to go back to the sort of problematic place. Or into the current expansion, you know, if this is a new build for you. Again, though, if you're sort of at that point where you're still on the lower level armor than you want to be on, or the lower level stats than you want to be on, i.e. you're not on exotics, I wouldn't necessarily go testing it in the current expansion. Once you're relatively happy with it, go ahead and get your armor is basically, you know, the level of armor that you're after. That's my advice basically. Let's find something to shoot at. That'll do. I am gonna die. I am wholly expecting to die here. So we'll just see how long I can stay alive. Yeah, I'm not doing any damage to this thing.
This is getting serious.
Okay, so I may have sacrificed too much sustainability. And I might just have to deal with the fact that she... what's the word? Yeah, I might just have to deal with the fact that she is not going to do as much damage. And this is what I was talking about with sort of having to sacrifice stuff. Yeah, this is not designed to solo. I have done 1% damage. And she's not getting up from that. Okay. But you get the point. So, yeah. I mean, what I end up doing from here is stuff like that. I jump into stuff that I should not be able to do. I'm not saying you have to do this, but I will jump into stuff that I'm not supposed to be able to do on my own, and I'll see how long I survive. If I survive for longer than I'm expecting to, then I've got a decent amount of sustainability. If I don't survive for as long as I'm expecting to, then I probably need to have a look at it. Same as like with trash mobs, so I will jump into those, and if I'm not killing them particularly quickly, then I need to look at the DPS. And it is a balancing act from here on out. But it very rarely requires me to actually change my armor or the stats that I'm running. It usually means that I need to look at food or utilities, but I try to make a build that doesn't require those to run around just in open. Or it means that I need to look at the trait lines again, or maybe some of my trinkets, they're cheaper to replace than armor and weapons are, so maybe my runes even. And sometimes the slot skills as well, you know. So, yeah. Have fun. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.